advisors. Abhishek has been a known name in the field of taxation and financial structuring, international tax, and corporate finance and M&A. He has been partners at various leading firms, including EY, BMR, PwC, and others. He's joined by KDM's FinTech Task Group, Mr. Timana Gowda, who is also leading CEO of What's Loan. I think during this event, both of them will discuss about the implication on startups of the union budget 2023. I think over to you, Mr. Goenka and Mr. Gowda. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon or good evening, rather. Just to double check, I'm audible, I guess. So we'll jump straight into the provisions of the finance bill. Now, while obviously I'll try and keep it focused on startups and to whatever limited extent there is any direct impact on fintechs, but I'll just also give an overview and then emphasize a little more on the startup related points. First and foremost, and I know there are a lot of numbers here, but I think the focus really should be on the last column, which is no change. So other than for individuals where the highest rate, which is for those individuals earning more than 5 crores of income, used to be a 42.74 rate, that is now down to 39%. So there's somewhat good news for high earning individuals. But other than that, it depends how you want to look at it as good news or not, but there is no change in any tax rate. Now, from a startup perspective, one of the big asks, or two of the big asks, were that listed shares, when they're sold on as long-term shares, are taxed at about 12%, whereas private shares are taxed at about 24%. So if you see these two rates here, right, the 23.92 and the 11.96, that shows how listed 11.96 and 23, how listed shares have a huge benefit compared to private shares. There was an ask that startups or private companies take as much risk, and this parity should be brought out. So to that extent, as founders, if there is any exit you are making on shares of your startup, you'll still have to pay a higher 24% tax as compared to what somebody in a listed company pays. Similarly, when it comes to ESOP taxation, there was a hope that they would rationalize it and make it taxable entirely as capital gains instead of it being taxed partly as salary, which is currently the case, but that also has not happened. Skip this. So basically, let me just spend 5 minutes on the salary taxation. Like I said, the rate has come down and there is now a concept of a new personal tax regime that has been introduced. What the new scheme says is that by default, everybody will move to the new scheme. The new scheme, the main thing is that if you're in the new scheme, you can't claim any kind of deductions, which means you take your income and you go straight into the slabs and apply the slab. If you want to claim deductions, then you have to remain under the old scheme, but that has to be by way of a specific election. So earlier, the way it used to work was that you had to elect to move to the new scheme. Now, by default, everybody's in the new scheme and you have to elect to move into the old scheme if you believe that you're willing to pay a higher rate of tax because of the fact that you're claiming a lot of deductions. Now, again, as a very high-level rule of thumb, given that the deductions available are fairly minimal in today's environment, by and large, if you have income above 1 crore, it's better to be under the new tax regime without claiming any deductions. So this is how the structure works. If you're under the old tax, then there are 4 slabs, and for the new tax regime, they've rationalized it a little more, where they've reduced, they've taken away the 25% rate and it's straight away 30%. So like I said, as you move to the higher rates of tax, higher levels of income, presuming that your deductions are fairly minimal, it's better to move to the new tax and pay a lower rate of surcharge as compared to remaining under the old scheme. Couple of other important things when it comes to individuals. I'll just cover what is relevant. One is, let's start with point 2, which is on insurance policies. Earlier, only for ULIPs, there was an withdrawal of the income tax exemption. Now, any policy where the yearly premium exceeds 5 lakhs, excuse me, to the extent you get the maturity proceeds prior to death, that will now become taxable. Earlier, in general, on insurance policies, whatever you got, whether on death or even on maturity or even periodically or money back policies, they were always exempt. Now, and when I say now, from April 1, so any new policies that you take where the premium is more than 5 lakh rupees per annum, of course, God forbid, if you get it on death, then in your hands or in your successor's hands, there's no tax. But at any maturity pre that, you will have to pay tax. So to some extent, if you're looking at some big high value insurance policies, you might have to expedite that before 31st March. The other important thing is, leave encashment, which is the last point for non-government, which of course for private employees. The limit has gone up drastically to 25 lakhs or 3 lakhs. So this gives a huge tax benefit to employees who have accumulated leave balances. I'll just very quickly talk about this. This is something to do with REITs. REITs and InvITs, but more commonly known as REITs, which is Real Estate Investment Trust. There was a particular interpretation being followed by the industry where any capital being returned to the investor was not being taxed. That has now changed. And to that extent, again, if any of you are personally investing in REITs, you should just check what the effect of this will be on your post-tax returns. Similarly, on market-linked debentures, there is a negative impact. Some of you may have been personally investing in something called MLDs. Earlier, because these were listed, they were automatically getting taxed at 10%. Now, irrespective of how long you hold these for, they will be deemed to be short-term and you will have to pay tax on the higher rate. This again important for founders who are looking at an exit. Many times, whenever there's a founder that makes an exit, and you sell the shares of your startup, the only available tax saving was if you invested the capital gains to buy a home. And earlier there was no limit. So let's say you had an exit and you had a capital gain of 50 crores, depending on where and what kind of house you wanted. Let's say you wanted a house in Bombay, which is worth 20 crores. You could have sheltered 20 out of the 50 crores from income tax. Now they've capped it to 10 crores. Again, when I say capped it from April 1. So to that extent, of course, if you're in Bangalore, maybe it doesn't make a big difference, but to the extent you're living in other cities and the costs of the luxury homes are higher, this will definitely come in the way of the extent to which you would have protected your earnings from exit of shares. I'll skip this. This is a very technical point. Let me just come to the angel tax provisions. This, I think, is what has got the most attention. Just to summarize the current position, the way it works today is that if you're a company, right, and if you're raising equity money from any investor, then typically you do it based on a valuation of your company. And to that extent, you have a certain face value per share because your valuation of this is obviously higher. The balance that the investor invests goes as share premium, right? Now, several years back, and totally not aimed at startups, but unfortunately, startups are facing the biggest brunt of this. There was a section of the Income Tax Act which said that if you raise share money at a premium which is higher than the fair value, then that higher premium or the super premium or the excess premium will become income for the company raising the money. Now, obviously, at the time this came, there was a hue and cry. What startup said is that in our business, it's very hard for us to justify very precisely what the valuation of the company is because These are all at early stages. They're at an idea stage. It's really what an investor and the founders perceive as the value. And hence, if you want to start challenging the valuations at which we receive capital, it's going to create an unnecessary burden. So to address that, three things were done. One, they said this will apply only if the investor is an Indian investor. Even within Indian investors, they said if the investor is an AIF, which is a registered VC fund in India, then again it will not apply. So first, only for Indians, not for non-residents. Secondly, within Indians, not for registered VC funds called AIFs. And third, they said that if you are a registered startup, now please remember here, registration is not just with the DPIT, but you have to also have the income tax registration with the interministerial standing committee. So if you take both legs of the startup approval, then again this section will not apply. So while that was still halfway road, because it was not possible for every startup to get the startup exemption, at least the big benefit was this section did not apply to investments made from outside India. And the reality is that a bulk of the investments still come from foreign funds. What this budget does is they take away that exemption given to non-resident investors, which means if you're not a DPIT interministerial approved startup, then other than AIFs today, all other categories of investors, whether resident or non-resident, you will have to determine the fair value, and anything which is above the fair value will become taxable. So this is a fairly retrograde step. Rather than withdrawing the tax or making it easier, they have increased the coverage. Now the government's argument is this was an unintended exemption given to non-residents for bringing parity and all of those things, which is fair, but overall this significantly increases the compliance and the potential risk for startups. I'll just focus again on online gaming because this might again be of some interest to startups. Basically, there was a huge ambiguity on firstly whether all of these gaming solutions and apps were legal, and as to what the tax impact would be. Now, the way the government has introduced it, very similar to what they did with crypto last year, rather than getting into whether it's legal or not, they just introduced a certain set of provisions to tax it. So essentially what they're now saying is that whatever is somebody's earnings through any of these online gaming portals or channels or apps, it will all be taxed at the highest rate of 30%. So irrespective of the slab that you fall in, right, it will all be taxed at 30% on the net winnings in cash or kind, right? And at the end of the year, if nothing is withdrawn, then the TDS will be done by the gaming portal at the end of the year or whenever there is any withdrawal. So net, what this basically says is that indirectly it kind of again legitimizes gaming. Says please run whatever kind of games you want, as long as any winnings are taxed at 30% at the highest rate. Now, obviously, there are some details weighted, which is the main one being what is the computation of the net winnings. Because if you see the way the GST authorities have been going after the gaming companies, they are taxing they want GST paid on the gross stakes. Now, obviously, if you're going to do a GST on the gross stake, it makes a huge impact because what the participant makes is nowhere close to the gross. Similarly, here, hopefully, the computation is logical and is only the net winnings as commonly understood. Because if there's any way in which they want 30% tax paid on the gross stake, it would make things very, very complex. Some of these I'll just skip because these are fairly technical in nature. I'll just very briefly talk about charitable trusts because through direct or indirect ways you may have some touch points with charitable trusts. The short point I really make here is that the laws around charitable trusts are getting tighter and tighter. So to the extent you're a trustee or you have any nexus with a charitable trust, the rigor of compliance, the rigor of how you handle donations, all of that is becoming very tough. and any lapse can result in a fairly severe exit tax, which means whatever exemptions you had claimed through the life of the trust have to be surrendered. So I think just want to leave the point that everything has got very tight around charitable trusts. Excuse me, I just have a bad throat. When it comes to TDS, again, these are largely on financial markets and largely on debt markets. So there used to be a lot of TDS exemptions on foreign debt instruments and on domestic listed securities, and similarly on certain specified mutual funds. All of those relaxations have gone. So this is expected to have somewhat a negative impact on the debt markets. Again, not very relevant to the startup world, but just something important to know that the government seems to be pulling back all kinds of exemptions given on TDS side. I just cover this because again it's important. There is something called TCS, which is different from TDS. So TDS is if I am paying, A is paying B, at the time of making the payment, A will deduct some tax and pay to the government on behalf of B. TCS is almost like an advance tax, which means that I don't have to be making a payment to anybody. If I am remitting foreign exchange, then at the time of remittance, the bank will not allow me to make the money payment until whatever is the prescribed percentage, which used to be 5%, until 5% of whatever I'm remitting outside India is paid by me like an advance tax. Now, the main impact is that if you're doing it for education or medical, there's no change, it's still 5%. But all other kinds of LRS or ODI remittances made by an individual, from a 5% above 7 lakhs rate, it is now 20% without any limit. So to that extent, if as an individual, you have obligations to invest outside India, or you have a flip structure where you have to remit money from India to a company in the US or Singapore, which in turn will invest back in India. This is something important because it increases the overall cost of the transaction. I'll again skip this. This is relevant if you're in the real estate sector for taxation of joint development agreements. This is an important one. Again, of course, not many startups have been truly able to take the benefit. Just as a background, there's a general section which says that if the shareholding of a company changes by more than 49%, then it loses the benefit of being able to carry forward and set off the losses. For startups, and again, this has to be a registered startup, they had given an exemption saying that this rule will not apply for 7 years from the date of incorporation. Now they've extended it to 10 years. So of course, it's a welcome move. The only question is that given the way markets are going, will startups still make profits even within the first 10 years of their existence? Ideally, if they really wanted to benefit startups, they should have given it endlessly, because what happens is that while it's gone from 7 to 10 years, most of your losses will be made, let's say, in year 6 to 10. That is where you got the funding, you're really out there in the market. And if year 11 onwards, it is denied again, then there's really no sense in making this extension. So I think when it comes to startups in general, while they are taking these baby steps, the real benefit is hardly able to be taken by anybody in a meaningful way. Again, I'll skip this. We can circulate some of this if it is relevant to specific people. From a fintech perspective, if anybody is in the gold kind of products, one of the important things is that physical gold to digital and digital gold back to physical, both those legs are now exempt from tax. So they are treating both physical and digital as almost fungible, which means until you actually monetize it into cash, you can keep converting it from one form to another without any tax liability arising. This is an important one. If you are classified and if you've registered yourself as an MSME, excuse me, one of the benefits was that you would get paid on time, and in case companies did not pay you in time, they had to necessarily make a disclosure in their audit report, and there was a mandatory interest. Now, as one more incentive to make sure larger companies pay MSMEs, they have basically said that until you pay the MSME, we will not give it to you as a deduction against your income. So this is definitely a welcome move, and to that extent, if some of you are not registered yourselves as MSMEs, you should, because it will ensure more timely payments of your dues from larger companies. Just one or first and the third one are relevant here. One is something called presumptive taxation, where you don't have to go through a tax audit and you have a lower rate of tax. That limit is enhanced from 50 lakhs to 75 lakhs, so that's a welcome thing. And as far as startups are concerned, earlier the limit was 23, so now they've extended it by one more year. So anyone setting up to 2024, subject to qualifying for all the other exemptions, can still get the startup status. I think these are again fairly technical, not very relevant to the startup world. On assessments, again, hopefully you are not in the assessment phase itself, but one general welcome thing that has happened is that for low demand cases, which are presumably where maybe if you are already being assessed and being litigated, there's a new category of joint commissioner appeals that has been set up, so that the backlog, because of very few commissioner appeals, can be dealt with. And this joint commissioner can hear the cases and dispose them. So in that sense, a welcome move. And if there is any litigation, you should take advantage of this by trying to get the matters listed before the joint commissioner and seek for an early disposal. These are again a few fairly technical points. Time limit for assessment is important. Again, more a procedural relaxation. It's increased from 9 months from the end of the year to 12 months. So this gives a little more time to companies to respond to the demands that come from the tax department. I'll skip this. These are again very procedural changes. Just as a headline, most of them are favorable, but again, will not be hopefully relevant that you will not be at your early stage of operations. Again, very quickly on the GIFT City, just as a general statement, a huge boost. So, if any of you all are building your businesses around solutions for the GIFT City or companies in the GIFT City, I think these are all very positive moves. A lot of single window type of clearances will now be given. Similarly, there's anyone setting up in GIFT City gets a lot of tax exemptions, and the window for that has been extended. So overall, a big boost for GIFT City in case any of you are building businesses around it. And the last one is on SEZs. Again, presumably, may not be too many of you all setting up your development centers in an SEZ, but in case you are, then earlier you had no time limit to recover the money from the export. Now you have a 6-month window to recover. So I'll just pause here. I think it will be more meaningful to take this as Q&A. But just to summarize, I think the key aspects for startups are the angel tax, which is negative. But on the positive side, the additional period for claiming the set-off of losses and for the tax holiday. But that, of course, comes with the condition that you should be registered with both the wings of the government.
Thank you, Abhishek. I have some questions. Before that, I would like to know if there are any questions out of the walkthrough of the tax provisions and the budget we have seen. Can I take some questions, and then I have a couple of questions? You can put them on the chat, or you can come online and ask questions to Abhishek directly. Do I take it as there are no questions? Can I go ahead with my questions? You can follow up with your questions later.
Yeah, sure, Timana.
Okay, thank you so much, Kanchan. Abhishek, good. Actually, we are hearing from the expert. Primarily, I look at, okay, I'm a founder. I'm also pay a salary to myself. It looks like I've got a little bit of leeway there, and want to know, okay, when I am a founder, should I pay a salary to myself, or should I wait for the upside to happen and put it for a secondary sale? What do you think is the best mode if I take the next 3-5 years for a founder who's come with a background of working somewhere and paying taxes on the salaries? If I have to balance between these two, the direction that you see today and then the provisions that are coming out, they're quite stable. I can see that they're quite stable and they're quite encouraging for the self-employed people, including what you said is self-employed, professional, non-professional, increasing from 50 lakhs to 75 lakhs to 3 crores and all that. What do you think? How do we balance looking at next 3 years?
No, so definitely some salary is recommended, not just from a tax perspective, but I think just from a fundamental, how do you protect yourself as a founder? Because when you're bootstrapped, it's one thing not to take a salary. But as you raise external capital, and it's not that just because there's external capital, as a founder, you should throw everything away. But I think a business should also be built on the basis that it is able to sustain the right level of costs for the management team, right? Otherwise, it's sort of giving the wrong metrics. And the question is that while it's benefiting the shareholders, you are effectively subsidizing the benefit by investor shareholders. So I think from that perspective, as well as from a tax perspective, would recommend that even if not full market, at least 70-75% of market salary should be drawn. And then thereafter, of course, whatever is the secondary exit as a capital gain will be more beneficial.
Because capital gain has not changed, for the unlisted shares has not changed. There is no direction coming out there clearly that, okay, we encourage people to create wealth, sell off, make money, even that whatever people aspire to invest in a very big house, in a luxury house, even that is cut off to 10 crore. Somebody would have bought a 50 crore house last year, they cannot buy this year or thereafter, right? So another thing is, look, they have provided a lot of things for agriculture budgets for lending have been increased, and there is a lot of allocation to PMAY under the housing subsidy scheme. A lot of youngsters as a basic 18 lakh thing. Everybody qualifies. 90%, 95% people qualify. How do you think the real estate and housing finance companies, or it's consistent? I am seeing that every year they're extending and they're looking at home for how should happen. They call it what they call it as affordable housing, still at the middle and little upper middle class, up to 50-60 lakh are provided for. What do you think should be the way housing finance companies or individuals, youngsters, should they buy the houses early on as a way of saving, the way of building an asset? And how do you think the real estate companies should also benefit out of this whole push that is going to come from the government and the banks? Because banks are also building secured assets better than the unsecured assets on their books.
Yeah, see, I think generally, partly because of the policy and tax, and partly because of post-pandemic, I think the real estate sector is doing very well. More and more people want to buy homes, whether it is the start category or the luxury category. All categories of homes are doing very well right now. I think if you look at it purely from a tax perspective, you get, of course, the deduction of the housing loan that you take. So to that extent, there is some benefit. But the way the new scheme says that you move into the new scheme without claiming any deductions, I think tax as a reason to buy a home is gradually becoming irrelevant. But nonetheless, of course, it's a very tricky question, because if you see the rental yields on residential property, they are still abysmally low at 1.5%, 2%, maybe 2.5%. So what I mean by that is, if you buy a house and you put it on rent, you get hardly a 2.5% or 3% if you're lucky yield, whereas you can easily earn that much more by any other investment, even a fixed deposit. So one counter view is that, why should I put my capital and buy a house? Because appreciation also has somewhat got limited these days. The early days where a house would double in value every 5-6 years is not happening. And also, with so much new supply coming in, people always prefer buying a new home compared to a older home. So unless your home is in a very, very unique location or a very unique project, the appreciation is limited. So economically, if you look at it, and maybe there's a contrarian view, but economically, buying a home is not a great choice these days. But of course, in our country, from a culture, from a way of life perspective, everybody wants to have that security of having their own home, which is what is driving the markets, and I think more and more real estate companies are actually selling out their projects very quickly.
Yeah, that's a good view because if people do not stop buying for the second home and the third home to rent, I don't think home for all will ever happen.
Yes.
The market will get overheated. You are saying that they should take benefit of whatever the first home that they have. That is where the tax provision comes.
Correct.
Even if you're below 18 lakhs, you will also get PMAY subsidy. Enjoy that, and people. You are saying that affordable housing should reach there out there. Like the government is heavily focusing on class 2, class 3 cities with a heavy allocation of the infra budgets and all that. I think that all will come into play. When you build roads and build infrastructure, that I think appreciation will happen.
Absolutely, I think.
But when you look at that, do you think these salary class or self-employed should they invest as a rental return? Should they invest in real estate which is commercial in nature? I mean,
commercial definitely gives a better return.
What are the tax benefits they can? Vis-a-vis, the housing side, what are the tax benefits they can they set off the interest, the rental versus the interest?
It's capped at 2 lakhs a set off, but as such, there's no difference. Now, the commercial properties give you a yield of, again, depending anytime, anywhere between 7 to 9%. So to that extent, it's definitely better. But I think the challenge in commercial is that it's very hard to find a small ticket commercial property. House you can buy for 30 lakhs, 40 lakhs, but to buy a commercial property, you won't get it. You have to get a part of a floor. It gets into other challenges of managing it and all that. Because a lot of these fractional platforms that are out there today, which are fractionalizing real estate and putting out smaller sizes.
Yeah, okay. A follow-up question on that. I think we have seen this happening in US under Jobs Act and all that, like fractional ownership. This is, I think, quite pending with SEBI or somewhere in between, that crowdsourcing, fractional ownership, though it is recognized loosely, quasi-legal, I won't even call it, it's very legal. People have been selling these schemes and we see that. But do you think any law is there, tax laws or general laws are there which will support a fractional ownership? I have seen that, somebody in a commercial plate can buy banks are provided for it in the loan schemes. You can own a 200 square feet, but you will have to get not exactly marking, if you can get a khata, I will fund it. And you have a better return so that I can fund it for 10, 15 years. Do you think the government should look at that, whether so that everybody starts investing in the real estate just above the REITs? REITs is already there, but if you want a piece of property, that I want 100 square of this mall or something like that. What is your opinion?
In general, yes, I think the government should incentivize it, or let's say incentivize, permit it to happen. But I think it's a tricky one because if you look at the view or the way the government looks at it, is wherever there is an accredited and an informed investor, that's where they say let the investor take their own course. But for that, let's say in an AIF, they have a 1 crore limit. Saying if you're able to invest 1 crore, it means you have your resources, you are an informed investor. Now, when it comes to retail fractionalization of real estate, there are products where you can invest 5,000 rupees also, 5 lakhs also, 10 lakhs also. I think it's definitely the need of the hour, but I personally believe some regulation is better than unregulated. Because if it's totally unregulated for every...
It will proliferate on its own.
For every 3 good products, there will be 7 wrong products, which will mess the market up. And then once something goes wrong, then the government will clamp down overall. So I think a regulated market where they create some checks and balances in terms of who's making the offering to make sure that the proper diligence is done on the property so the risk is mitigated. And with those checks and balances, even if they reduce the ticket size to more retail bite size, I think it will be a good thing for.
So you're saying certain income levels or net worth people can enter that market because they're informed people, they're knowledgeable people.
Or even if you drop it, then put some diligence requirements on the offering, which means that the property be diligence by
both on the real estate builders as well as the banks who are funding it, they should at least cut it off. So on this, primarily when we look at, there has not been much of improvement in employment, though we have a 65-35 ratio. like 65% of the people under 35 years or 50% of the people are under age 20. They're just graduating after finishing the school, college, right? So what do you think government has done or should be doing to encourage that you become the self-employed person and you are able to employ another 5-10 people? I think average is about 5-10 people of any self-employed. I saw some provisions have been relaxed there. And what do you think they should have done, or they should be doing more to encourage that?
I think, see, they recognize startups and the role startups are playing in creating employment. And I think to that extent, some of these agri accelerators that they've talked about, the funds that they're talking about, definitely creates the window for entrepreneurs to take the plunge and potentially seek funding, not just from the private side, but even from the government bodies. So I think there's a clear recognition in the policymakers now that employment cannot be created only by the mega projects or the large manufacturing. Every small entrepreneur creates jobs, and it's not about the direct jobs only, it's also about the indirect jobs. Right? Because you hire 5 people, then you have an office, and then you need somebody to manage the office and guard the office. So there's a lot of spiral effect. Now, I think in general, there should be more incentive for job creation. There is a section which is used by many large companies where if you employ more than 100 people and if they are of a certain category, then you get a weighted deduction of the wage cost. I think they should, given the high need for employment generation, they should just generally incentivize employment generation and say that whatever you spend on creating jobs, even if it is 5 people and you don't increase the 5, but you're just retaining 5 people, that also should be incentivized. It should not only be that if you make 5 into 10, 10 into 50, but retaining 5 also takes a lot of effort. So maybe just a general weighted deduction saying that if you're spending 100 on payroll, we'll deem it to be 125 from a tax deduction perspective. That gives an incentive for somebody to take more people on boards.
And when we saw that angel tax, if you're a DPIIT approved startup, those things are not applicable.
Yeah.
Don't you think the DPIIT approved becomes too restrictive in nature? That's one. And the concept of startup itself, if you want to really proliferate self-employment, getting classified as startup, having technology around every business is extremely difficult for a place like India. When you talk about agriculture, every MSMEs and all that, there might be a tool, there might be a process, there might not be a technology. What I see increasingly, everybody is trying to search for the technology. So we are force-fitting a lot of technology into a startup idea. Don't you think government should broad-base the concept of startup? I could look at few farmers coming together and being a startup. Don't you think the state government should also look at how to recognize a startup other than just not being a technology company or technology-oriented company? What are your views on that?
No, I agree. See, I think the starting point itself is misplaced. So we have provisions that are penal and wrong and illogical. Rather than just scrapping them, we say, okay, we want to continue with illogical provisions, but we give exemptions to startups, and then you again create 10 hindrances or 10 levels of challenges in getting the startup exemption. So my view is actually similar to yours, but at a different perspective, that first scrap all these angel tax. Don't have angel tax and then say exempt for startups and then let me make startups easy. That is sort of attacking the problem in the wrong way. Just scrap angel tax. It is completely wrong for any company to raise money and to be expected to pay tax. So similarly, if you have to give an exemption from carry forward losses, why only to startups? I mean, anyone starting a business is taking a risk, right? And to that extent, even somebody who's a large industrialist who may be starting his 10th business, I think it's unfair to say, it's that person is still taking risk.
Taking another risk.
Right? So it's somewhat unfair to say, no, if you're already a big industrial house, then you don't get the benefit. And again, no offense, but many times startup founders are serial founders and they have a lot of money. So why make all these, you have to enter here and then you have to turn left, but if you turn right, you're disqualified, but if you go straight, you're okay. But then, too many ifs and buts are created. So my view is simplify the laws, encourage entrepreneurship and innovation and risk taking in general, and don't have so many subsets.
So we saw a lot of allocation for capital expenditure. There was no specific allocation for digital infra, though we have enough digital infra. I think there has been a demand for MDR. There is no MDR. The payment companies are not surviving because there is no MDR allowed. Don't you think this should have been taken as a cost of digital infra, or cost of digitizing the nation? Do you think they should have allowed that, or do you think it should come up next time around?
So it is definitely required. I think the government needs to recognize that proliferation of digital payments, etc., sometimes has a cost, and if there is a cost at an acceptable level which consumers have to bear, so be it, because nothing can grow genuinely based on subsidies.
One last thing, our wish is so that now we are done with the settled budget. Most of the people are happy, the industrialists, experts like you. We are going to the Karnataka budget. Within the state and as part of the KDM, Karnataka Digital Mission as a fintech task group, and we also have taking a lot of these things outside Bangalore. That is, we call it as beyond Bangalore. What do you think government should look at, to encourage more startups to come outside of Bangalore, and what are those 1, 2, 3 things they should pick up and look at, encouraging them for next, say, 1 to 3 years, 1 to 5 years kind of thing. What comes to the top of your mind to support these startups outside Bangalore? Bangalore anyway will attract startups.
Yeah, see, to me it is incentives and all of that go only up to a level. Honestly, as a state government, you can give a few incentives. Now nothing is there in the state's hand. You can't give any GST incentives. You can't give any income tax incentives. Startups are not about land or getting land at a cheaper rate. If at all, you can give some exemptions on things like electricity duty, etc. But again, given that startups are not big consumers of, let's say, power, etc., most of it I don't believe will be incentive driven. To me, the proliferation to smaller cities will all be based on creating social infrastructure. I mean, today, if you look at where we're sitting, HSR, why is there so many startups here? Because of the social infrastructure. Where the first startup came, the second, the 10th, and the 100th, and you can, be with each other, the whole ecosystem there. So we need to create a few, excuse me, pick a few places across the state and create that sort of social infrastructure.
We have already done that. There is a cluster approach, and government, we have been asking government to allocate something. Like, for example, in Bihar, Telangana, and Andhra, they have given certain, if you come and set up something in Vizag, for example, with the free space, we'll also pick up 50% of the salary, up to 30,000 rupees per head, up to 10 people. Some of these things which happen in, I think, Australia and Canada.
Yes, so absolutely, but my point is one step further, that if there are 20 companies who come into the cluster, they will also look at what is the social infrastructure around it. Is there there movie theaters around? Are there some hotels around? Are there some restaurants around? And I think in general, that is where these clusters have not succeeded, not specifically for Karnataka or Bihar, where you need to create a lot of surrounding infrastructure, and it becomes a chicken and egg situation. So if simultaneous to giving the incentives to the startups, and the government can also incentivize some of the other ecosystem players, I think that will make this happen much faster.
Okay, can we open for questions? They're on the chat or they will ask. I think please go ahead and ask question to Abhishek.
Yes, so there's a question from Suresh H from Plexin. He would like to know about the realization of income tax exemptions for DPIIT registered startups. How easy or how hard is it? What I believe is that there is a clearance needed from inter-ministerial body, and very few startups have been able to get through it. This exemption is allowed for 3 continuous years during the first 10 years.
Yeah, so there are, there is a tax holiday, there is a benefit on carrying forward losses, there is the exemption from angel tax, and there is the relaxation on ESOP taxation. So broadly, these are the 4 kinds of benefits you get under the Income Tax Act if you're a interministerial approved startup. That, of course, unfortunately, as you were also saying, is that one of the criteria for the IFSC approval is that you should be doing innovative technology and this and that. I think startups themselves are.
Where is it?
You will always be pivoting. What is essential technology? What is innovative technology? I think it's. I'm not saying that the ministerial board is not competent, but I think the world and the market itself is moving so fast for somebody to determine. So yes, I certainly agree with the person asking the question that the process needs to be streamlined so that the real benefit of these 4 exemptions can be obtained.
Yeah, as a startup, which you apply for DPIIT, DPIP number and DPIIT, it's been quite smooth.
First step is very small.
Yes. No, even the second one was also it just took about 35-40 days.
Right.
It is very small, and you have to submit some proofs of what you've been doing.
Absolutely.
And I think they fairly want to.
No, absolutely.
Approve.
No doubt on that. I just feel that
It is not like questioning your thing, as long as you can prove it. Not that there was any interviews held, any proofs are like a deep dive. Yes, we got an approval. I can say I got an approval, so it is quite fairly done.
Absolutely.
People should try and attempt it and apply for it, and be on the safer side. As I said, I would love to hear more about the ESOP side, but ESOP, angel tax, you get all the benefits, including that paying on time.
Yes.
All of these are applicable to MSMEs, but more so with the startups.
And I think the approvals are forthcoming. The only other thing is that some of these limitations that your turnover should not exceed 100 crores. That is somewhat okay, but you should not have raised more than 25 crores of capital. So again, I just feel that to the point we made earlier, that if you're encouraging innovation and enterprise, don't have so many boundaries to it.
Any other questions?
Yes, we have one more question from Maha Iyer. Does being registered on Startup India, etc., provide any additional benefit?
Yeah, like I said, there are 4 buckets: the income tax holiday, the exemption from angel tax, the exemption from loss of the lapse of the losses because of a change in shareholding, and the 4th is the tax holiday, ESOP, angel tax, and carry forward losses.
They've extended the carry forward losses.
Carry forward also from 7 to 10 years.
Any other questions?
That's it.
Yeah. Hi, Abhishek. Just wanted to thank you for coming on board today. It's been a very useful session. I'm a part of TiE Bangalore FinTech Committee. I work along with Sandhya, and it's a pleasure to have you here and also listen to Timana today. Abhishek also wanted to share with all of you here is I'm building a community for women, which is looking at providing opportunities to college girls, to corporate women, to entrepreneurs, to even homemakers, and also growth avenues for growth for them. And the platform is called Inspire, which is seeing good amount of interest and traction by women. So one of the things that I was looking at was this angel tax. So I was wondering, like, why is it that the foreign investors are kind of up in arms against being brought into the purview of the angel tax this time around? And there are also some talks about how you can't make an ESOP pool, how you can't do a M&A during this time if you are taking angel tax, and also could you elaborate a little bit on those aspects?
So, Kanchana, it's not so much about foreign investors being up in arms against the new change. I think the question is, like I said earlier, this whole tax is misplaced to start with.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of making its applicability less and less, here we have the government who's making the applicability wider and wider.
Mm-hmm.
With the only defense being that why should one investor be exempt and another investor be taxable?
Mm-hmm.
Or be covered. That's fair. I think, we talk about a level playing field, it's about leveling it by taking the tax away, not by making it applicable to all and sundry.
Right.
So I think that's where the government, in my opinion, is misplaced. What this effectively does is that it makes it very hard for startups to figure out the exact valuation model when they're raising capital, because excuse me, ultimately valuation in a startup is very, very subjective.
Right.
And, today when you're raising your capital, you will have a certain set of projections. 2 years later, when the income tax officer is looking at it, the market may have changed and your projections may be very different. And it makes it very easy then for a tax officer to say, see, your own projections have not come true, which means you overvalued your business and now you have to please pay our taxes. So I didn't understand the point you made on impact on ESOP rules, etc. Because I don't think that has anything to do with angel tax. But to my mind, this whole thing needs to be scrapped rather than trying to say we're bringing investor parity.
Okay, so yeah, just to give a little clarity of what I was trying to say with the ESOP pool not being given, things like that. Apparently, because they're in some sections of the media, as I was reading, there's some view that during this, if you take the angel investment and apply for angel tax exemption, in that case, you can't do a ESOP pool basically. So basically, that's what my understanding is. I just wanted to get that right. That are there any restrictions after you take the money from the angels? Are there any restrictions after that on your activity?
No, none that I can think of.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we have one more question. Can you read it out?
Yes, this question is coming from YouTube. It's from Startup Sanatana. He asks, please talk a little bit on social entrepreneurship for startups. It is a little bit out of the question.
You'll have to give us the context. Tax angle, budgetary angle.
Do you have any thoughts on this?
No, not too much on the social side, definitely. Yeah.
So we're done with the questions here.
Abhishek, one more was there regarding the the 7 lakh exemption limit. I didn't get that particular part because the for the individual that taxation starts from I think till 3 lakhs it is exempt, and then there is also the talk about 7 lakhs of income tax rebate. What does that exactly mean?
Basically, what it means, to just simplify it, is if your income is up to 7 lakhs, there's no tax.
Okay, but we have the tax slab
But basically that income, whatever the tax comes as per the slab, that is what you get as a rebate. So net, if your income is up to 7 lakhs, there's zero tax also.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so this is Vinay from TAI. I'd like to thank you for your compelling session.
Thank you.
We look forward to more engagements.
Thank you.
With Sandhya and the team.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Abhishek. Thank you for coming and keep coming. We're going to have a series of talks like this from Kedam and Tai. Janki, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Kanchan.